and they had a new IBM laptop, which was brand new at the time that the US had given them. And I typed a memo all night, and at 7 a.m. gave it back to Quran, how to make a market economy. So that was my all-nighter of writing this. If anyone's interested, I'd be happy to email it to you, because many years later, someone found it in the archives and sent it to me. So I actually have a copy of that all night. And that became the basis of the Balcerowicz plan to an important extent, actually. And the idea was to make the currency convertible and open the borders to trade right away. That was the basic idea. And to back it up with two core financial steps. One was a lot of aid, and the key was something I recommended called the Polish Zloty Stabilization Fund, which was to give reserves for this new convertible currency. And the second was debt cancellation. And that theory became called the 7 postcards theory, because the night that the Mazowiecki came into power, there was a meeting of the OKP, which was the Solidarity members of parliament. And they invited 2 speakers that night, outside speakers. One was Senator Dole, who was the US chief senator, and he was there representing President Bush. And they invited me to speak. And it worked out very well, because Senator Dole spoke first and said the American people will do anything for the freedom of Poland. And then I stood up and I said, I agree with Senator Dole, and that's why I'm sure that America will cancel all of Poland's debts. And so I said, the way out of this is 7 postcards, 1 to each of the G7 countries, and tell them thank you very much, but the Soviet-era debts are gone. And in the end, Poland got about 60% of its debts canceled. The last step was Germany, because Germany was very resistant to canceling debt, as you can imagine. It took Balcerowicz. I sent Balcerowicz a copy of the 1953 London Agreement between post-Nazi Germany and the West, canceling the pre-World War II German debt. And Balcerowicz handed it to Helmut Schmidt, who looked at it in the meeting and said, you know, you have a point. Ended up, Germany supported the cancellation of the debt also. Not 100% as I wanted, 60%. So that was the origins of that. But it's worth all this reminiscing, I hope, to make a geopolitical point, which is that after that happened, I was asked by Grigory Yavlinsky, who was advisor to Gorbachev, to help President Gorbachev in 1990. And I believed that Gorbachev's idea, what he called the common European home, was exactly the right idea for Europe and for the Soviet Union. This is before the end of the Soviet Union. But Gorbachev said we should have a democratic Soviet Union, and it should be completely open, and we should have a peaceful European home, in fact, that stretches from Rotterdam to Vladivostok. I loved Gorbachev. I thought he was a man of incredible integrity and decency, basically, because he believed don't shoot people. This was his most core belief, don't shoot people. That was remarkable for a Soviet leader. And it was the greatest statesmanship of the age. And so he, as you know, and Hungary led the way in every way, opening the borders and showing the different path. Gorbachev said, we will dismantle the Warsaw Pact. And it happened at the time that Helmut Kohl and Hans-Dietrich Genscher and George Bush and James Baker said, whoa, that's good. That's big. If you do that, we won't move NATO 1 inch eastward. And so a deal was made in 1990. It's a very explicit deal. It's not just a conversation. It was actually a very deeply discussed and negotiated deal. So the deal was Warsaw Pact ended, NATO not moving at all, Germany reunified. And that was the deal, and I believed in that deal and believed in Gorbachev. And I recommended that the Soviet Union also get financial help because it was in a state of collapse, a failed economic system, a disastrous social conditions, and Gorbachev, of course, had borrowed a lot short-term in the mid-1980s to try to prop up the system, and all of that debt was coming due, and oil prices had collapsed at the end of the 1980s. So the Soviet Union was in a very sharp, short-term financial crisis. So with Yavlinsky and some of my colleagues at Harvard, we wrote a document which we called the Grand Bargain, which was that Gorbachev would continue the democratic reforms and the West would help the Soviet Union with this financial transformation so that the economic transformation could take place. Interestingly, this was presented to the White House in April of 1991. It was based on the same principles as the Polish episode. It was completely rejected by the White House. We're making no bargains, we're giving no help, no financing for the Soviet Union, no nothing. And I was a little surprised. Gorbachev was a little more surprised. He came back from the G7 summit in Houston only to be abducted and kidnapped in that attempted coup that summer. He came back empty-handed. And that was the end of the Soviet Union and the end of Gorbachev and Yeltsin's rise. And just to continue, because I'm going to come to the current moment in a moment, in September of 91, I got a call from Yegor Gaidar, who said, there's going to be an independent